Are you a busy woman who at times struggles with reducing your daily stress? Do you know that you need to slow down but do not know how? If you're looking at reducing your daily stress, you're in the right place. My name is Denise Eckert, and I welcome you to the Calm Your Daily Stress podcast. I just love interviewing guests so they can share their stress-reducing tips and techniques with you. Now, if you find this podcast helpful, please share it with someone who struggles with stress, because lowering our stress will make us a better person, a happier partner, mom, friend, neighbor, etc. And the best part is happiness is contagious. Enjoy this episode. Hi there, it's Denise Eckert, and I'm the host of Calm Your Daily Stress podcast. And today I've got a very important topic that we're going to cover, and it's stress and our autoimmune system, or a lot of times when we do live in stress, it's autoimmune diseases. And today I've got Xenia Brandstetter, and she's going to share her story with us. Now, in her previous life, Xenia used to work in finance until she fell ill in her 20s with multiple autoimmune diseases, and she couldn't keep up with her job and her life. And she was bedridden for a while and eventually decided to quit her job while focusing only on her recovery. During that time, she overshot and became obsessed with a healthy living lifestyle, struggling with depression and unable to handle the stress of it anymore. She was eventually able to turn it around and find new balance, which is when true healing finally happened. And she's now symptom-free and started coaching because she wants to support others who are going through the same thing and share her knowledge. Welcome, Xenia.
Hi, thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Denise. I'm really glad to be here.
Your story is very common, that we live in stress until our bodies shut down, and then it forces us to take an actual look at what's going on. And I used to work in corporate, I used to work in conferences, and I was bedridden. I would jump up and do the same thing again and again and again. And now we know better, right?
Yeah, it's sad that something like this needs to happen. But I mean, the truth is, when I got sick, I didn't realize it was stress related at all. It was only when I was so stressed from being sick that I understood that this was actually a common topic, even way before I got sick. So yeah, that took a long process to really realize how important stress is when it comes to our health.
And now what inspired you? Well, I know it's a lot of your introduction here. What really inspired you to do what you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean, definitely my own story. So I know how hard it was for me. I think just going through most of it on my own, because for some reason, I mean, I think this is something that a lot of us have in common, actually. We feel like this is a very personal topic. It's something very intimate. There's a lot of emotion attached to our health and like the struggles that we're going through. And it feels like something we have to figure out for ourselves. Like we have to empower ourselves, go this journey alone, wear like a badge of honor that we're going through this on our own. We don't need to ask for help. That is definitely how I felt. I felt like asking for help would tell other people that I failed, I can't do it on my own. And that made me push this journey out to much longer than it had to be. I'm sure it could have gone much better, much faster had I reached out and asked for help, but I didn't. And I felt like at the time, it wasn't so visible to me how much help there actually is available, how many people there are out there whose whole career is designed around helping people because they have also been in their shoes. I didn't really realize that, but it took me becoming a coach because I wanted to kind of coach myself. So that is actually why I signed up for coaching, to become a coach, because I wanted to figure out why I can't do it. What am I doing wrong? Like, what am I missing? And doing that was so much fun for me. It really like opened my eyes to what else there is out there apart from the job that I was stuck in, and really changed my mind on what I thought of having a career, having a successful career looks like. And that just made me change my whole attitude towards working also. What work life do I want for myself? What kind of people do I want to work with? Because my interest also changed, obviously. Like, I'm much more interested to talk to someone who's going through a health crisis, who has a really important topic that they want to talk about, that they are obviously passionate about, their health, and help them with that, rather than what I was doing before, which didn't actually personally affect me in any way. So that is my inspiration for why I became a coach, or a health coach more specifically.
And I love what you said, because it's so true that there is such a stigma towards mental health and stress. Like, if you cannot handle your stress, you do feel like you're a failure and you're doing something wrong. And a lot of times I found, when I know from personal experience, when I was going through very stressful situations, we tended to take more on because we didn't have the energy to create more boundaries or to say no because it was too much work. And we just made this horrible hamster wheel that we were on go round and round and round until we fell off and ended up being really, really sick. And why do you think there's such a stigma, or why do we feel like there's such a failure if we feel stressed? Why can't we reach out and ask for help? Like, what is that? Why can't we do that?
I think I mean, obviously it's
Heavy
a loaded question.
Yeah.
I think it's mostly because, I mean, also depending on what kind of environment we're in, right? At the time I worked in an environment that was very male dominated. So you don't want to make yourself vulnerable. You don't want to show that you can't keep up. You can't do that job. Everybody else can. For some reason, you can't. You don't want to be that person. When I started talking about this, so many people actually reacted very differently to what I thought they would react like. They didn't say, oh, clearly you're not cut out for this. Maybe you shouldn't do this job. They were saying, I feel the same. Thank you for telling me this. I don't know who to talk to about these things. And then I was like, oh, wow, like I wish you had said something earlier, because then I wouldn't felt so alone in this. But there's a lot of people who feel like that. They're just too scared to show that vulnerability, and to just show that somehow they can't handle what everybody else seems to be handling just fine. But yeah, it takes someone to open up to see that this is all a facade, and most people are pretending, most people are faking it. And also what you said earlier, you are so stressed, you can't deal with this stress, you keep taking on more and more to pretend it's all fine. And that is how you're starting this whole hamster wheel and this whole process of you're pushing beyond your boundaries to deflect from the fact that it's too much for you. Also to prove to yourself you can actually do it, because mostly it's also to ourselves. We don't want to admit that we can't do it. So we keep pushing. We don't know where these boundaries are anymore. We don't have any healthy boundaries left. And these whole lines of what's okay and what's no longer okay and what's too much are so blurry. We often don't even see that we're so far beyond our limits. So I think that's another thing, to really realize I am beyond my limit. I can't handle this anymore. Often we can't even see that. So it's not something we do consciously.
Yeah, and it's scary. First, let's start. What is an autoimmune disease?
Yeah, good question. So I think there's two ways of looking at this. So in conventional medicine, we say an autoimmune disease happens when our immune system, the body's immune system, that's supposed to be our defense system, right? It's supposed to protect us against any kind of foreign invader, bacteria, viruses, for example. When that starts to turn against our own cells, so instead of a bacteria, it starts to attack our body's tissues. And that can happen anywhere in the body. It could be your skin, it could be some organs, it could be different kinds of tissues like joints. Any part of the body really can be affected by that. That is one view of looking at it. If we're looking at it from a functional medicine standpoint, what we're saying is not the body is broken, somehow the system turned against ourselves. We're saying the immune system became dysfunctional for whatever reason, and stress plays a really big role in there. And the immune system can't decide anymore what is foreign and what is actually my own cells. So it's not that the immune system suddenly is your enemy and attacks you, but it's like it's so overwhelmed that it just shoots this way and that way, and somehow in the crossfire, you also get hurt. And I feel like that is a very important distinction, because the immune system is not the enemy here, right? It's a part of yourself. You can't really fight your immune system. Like, that's just counterintuitive. You don't want to hurt the part of yourself that is misguided, right? Somehow you want to support the immune system, repair it so it can function properly again. And I think that also takes a big mindset shift, how you look at your disease, because when we have something that isn't supposed to be there, like a virus, like any kind of infection, for example, but it could also apply to something like a tumor, right? Something that isn't supposed to be there, that is a clear enemy. We want to fight that part. We don't want that to be there. With an autoimmune disease, it's just yourself. It's just your body. So alienating that part of yourself and saying, that is the bad part, I don't want to have that, but it's still your immune system. You can't get rid of that, right? So that creates kind of like an inner rift. And it's really difficult for people sometimes to deal with their illness because of that. Like, how do you deal with that, right? How do you make sure I still love my body, I want to protect my body, at the same time I have this part here that doesn't work the way that I want? Do I force it? Like, how do I deal with this? So that's why I find talking about different approaches to viewing autoimmune diseases is really important.
Now, how does stress aggravate our immune system?
Yeah. So imagine the immune system, right? We said it's your defense system. Anything that threatens your body triggers your immune system. That might be if you're in a fight, your immune system is activated, right? In case you get hurt, in case anything happens to you, the immune system is there. It's kind of waiting. If something happens, I'm there. It's triggered. The same thing happens if you're exposed to something, a chemical, for example, that kind of infiltrates your body. Your immune system is going to be there. Your immune system is triggered. Your immune system is ready to defend yourself against the chemical. If these chemicals come from food, for example, if this comes from pollution, anything really, how your body comes in contact with that. The same thing happens, though, also if you don't sleep enough. Your immune system is triggered because, like, oh, you haven't slept enough. Now I need to work extra hard because you might not be like fully like functioning. You might not be functioning at the highest level. You're overwhelmed. You're tired. That doesn't feel safe for the immune system. So anything you do literally can trigger the immune system. And all of these things are different stressors on the immune system, right? It doesn't have to be mental stress, can be physical stress, can be emotional stress, can be stress from simply being overwhelmed at work, can be stress from eating the wrong things, eating something that harms your body. All of this is stress. For the immune system, it doesn't make a difference where that stress comes from. But all of this will trigger the immune system. So the immune system is supposed to only be active in an actual dangerous situation where your life is threatened. But it can't differentiate this stress that I have at work isn't threatening to me, because the immune system is very basic, right? It's a very basic human mechanism that hasn't evolved that as fast as human beings have evolved, right? It's still kind of like active or not active. This is the only way that it operates. So in today's world, anything we do, anything that gives us stress will trigger the immune system. And it's not made to deal with that kind of stress. So it becomes overwhelmed because it's constantly triggered and it doesn't have time to calm down again, to repair itself, also to regroup and get some energy again. It's always fighting on all different kinds of fronts. It can't calm down. How would it not become dysfunctional? Like it's just like anything else, any kind of machine that you have running at 150% of its capacity all day long, the machine breaks eventually, right? So it can't be a surprise that then for some people, the immune system doesn't work at all anymore. It doesn't protect them anymore. It becomes kind of downregulated. That is, for example, when we have something with dealing with cancer, where the immune system isn't active enough to fight these cells that aren't supposed to be there, right? It can go this way, or it can go the other way, where the immune system is too active. It fights everything. Somehow it also fights your own cells. So that's the connection with stress there. It's the main trigger for the immune system.
I love that you compared it to fight. That your immune system is sort of just on the sidelines waiting for this fight to happen. And in our day and age now, I mean, we can get an email, we can watch the news, or it's not even the phone calls anymore, but it's emails that you can get that trigger us to be upset. And right away, our body reacts, our stress is up, our autoimmune system is up, because it almost feels like we're always in a fight. And we're always exposed to something that's upsetting. And there is no way of saying, okay, brain, okay, autoimmune system, this is not life-threatening to me. I'm just watching this on the sidelines. How do you go around that? Just a quick break because I need to share this with you. In the past, I had a lot of pain in my shoulder, my knees, my ankle, and I know it's from my background of playing baseball. I used to be a carpenter, from driving, and even working on my computer. I tried everything, and still I'd be on the couch with my heating pad in pain. Well, lately a friend introduced me to a new product called NutriSwish. Things changed for me. I'm not kidding you, within days, no pain. And now I've been taking it for a few months, and what a difference. NutriSwish is all about glutathione. I didn't even know what glutathione was. Well, you know what? I sure do now. If you are experiencing pain, especially nerve damage, I encourage you to take a look. You can find out more in the show notes or go to www.therelaxationlounge.info and there's a tab above that says pain. Back to the show.
Yeah, so I have a perfect example for that. I just had lunch with my sister, for example, who is currently working in a doctor's practice. And she was telling me that she had a call with a patient who wanted an appointment and he couldn't get it fast enough. So he started yelling at her on the phone. She was trying to stay calm, but if someone yells at you, that feels threatening, right? So after the call, of course, her heart rate was elevated. She was kind of sweating. It felt stressful. So even though you're not actually being threatened, your body doesn't react that way. For your body, this still feels threatening when someone yells at you, right? When someone is saying hurtful things to you, that is triggering for the immune system because, again, the body doesn't feel safe in that situation. So it's little things like this that we're often not even aware of that make our immune system be active because the body doesn't feel safe. So how do you deal with that, right? I mean, how do you manage really any kind of this stress? So that's a really big question. And I think there's usually two things to it, right? Either you deal with the stressor or you deal with your response to the stress. And if we look at the stressor first, there's really only so much you can do about the stressor because it's something you often can't control, right? If there is stress in your life that you can cut out, perfect. Do that immediately. You don't want to have any of the stress that you don't need. But what do you do with all the stress that you can't cut out? Like, you can't just hang up the phone when someone becomes threatening, right? Like that is something you might have to deal with. You might have a stressful commute to work every single time. The solution is not you can't go to work anymore. So then what do you do with your response to that stress? And there's different things that you can do with that, right? And so when I work with my clients, usually what I have them do is a stress journal for a couple of weeks, maybe the first week, maybe 2 weeks, depending on how that goes. So first of all, they become aware and observe where different stress comes from in their life. Because often we don't know, right? Like with that phone call, it's not something she would have said at the end of the day, oh, this was very stressful, this was a tiny thing. But if we look at this every single day and we collect evidence of what stress does during our day, we have this awareness suddenly that we didn't have before, where we can say, oh, this is a moment that is now stressful for me, and I'm aware of that. I'm not a victim of this because this is just happening to me. I see this is a stressful situation. So we have that. As a second step, then we can think about what do you do in a situation like that where you are stressed? Do you have any healthy ways to deal with this stress? When you feel you're very stressed, what do you do? And that's also on the stress journal, for example, right? It's what is that stress? Can you avoid that stress in the future? How did you handle the stress? Was that a healthy way to deal with the stress? And if it wasn't, how can you deal with the stress better in the future? So that would be the observe part first. The second part is now, how do we find out what are healthy ways to deal with the stress? Do you have healthy ways to deal with stress? What are the current ways you deal with stress? And if someone says they are stressed, then they go home and watch TV. That is not a healthy way to deal with stress. That is how you kind of disassociate from that stress. You suppress it. The stress is still there. It feels like it's getting smaller and smaller, but you haven't dealt with it. You've suppressed it. It's become kind of part of your body. It's rooted somewhere. It doesn't just disappear, but you don't feel it in your head anymore. So you're avoiding it. Other people eat when they're stressed, right? Another way that's not super healthy to deal with stress. So there's many different things that we do consciously or unconsciously to deal with the stress. If that's not healthy, what are healthy alternatives? Could you go for a walk when you're stressed? Moving helps a lot because, like I said earlier, when we experience a stress, but we're not dealing with it immediately, it kind of sits in our bodies somewhere. So stress can just manifest as different symptoms also of your disease. It can manifest as tension in your body. So moving a little bit, stretching, going for a walk, going for like a yoga class is perfect, because you're not doing something super stressful most of the time, but you're stretching, you're moving your body, you're releasing that tension. Journaling is another excellent way of dealing with stress, because again, you're observing what happened to me. Was this really a threatening situation? Can I let that go somehow? Or reading a book, or just doing something fun, right? So having healthy stress management ways would be the second point. And then the third and last one would be, because now we talked about what happens if you are in a stressful situation, what can you do ahead of time before a stressful situation even arises? How can we build resilience to stress? And what works for that really well is usually any kind of mindfulness activity. So meditation works really well, breath works really well. And the reason why that works is because you're building this mental capacity to let stress simply be stress without affecting you. It's almost like you're increasing the fuse that you have between the stressor and your stress response. It's not one thing, but it kind of pulls it apart, and it gives you a moment to breathe and analyze the stress. Okay, this is stressful, this is happening. Now I choose my reaction. Now I decide, am I gonna like be super distracted and involved in the stress? Or can I say, I see the stress for what it is. Yes, this is affecting me. I am choosing to not be fully absorbed in that. And that's a skill that you first have to train, right? You have to train your mind to put that space, this buffer in front of you, so the stress doesn't affect you so much. But it's something that you can train. It's not going to happen in a week, but it's definitely a capacity you can train. And that's going to help a lot long term, because the further away you can push the stress, so it becomes this almost like an external entity and not a part of yourself, that's going to be the key. Because often what happens is stressor and stress response is an immediate thing. Something happens to us, we're immediately stressed. Like the whole body is immediately triggered. There's no buffer between it. And once we have that buffer, we can react completely differently. We can choose our reaction to it. We can have this whole awareness again of what is actually happening. We're not a victim of this anymore. We are our own person, our kind of self-directed person who has a choice in how they deal with the situation.
Wonderful. Now, for someone that's listening, what are some of the symptoms of having an autoimmune issue?
Massive amount of symptoms. So it can, because an autoimmune disease can affect any part of your body, you can have literally any symptom under the world. I think the most common ones are probably fatigue. So not just being tired, but feeling unable to function. Insane levels of tiredness. You wake up, you're already tired. Like you feel like you can't go to work, you can't do all of these things, you're constantly exhausted. I think that is probably the biggest thing that most people with autoimmune diseases experience at one point or another. So I remember for myself, I experienced this months before I was even diagnosed, before I even thought about going to the doctor, because I thought I was just burned out, right? It made sense to me. I was working long hours. I didn't take good care of myself. I didn't sleep well. Of course, I was going to be tired. But I remember having these fantasies while I was at work of just crawling under my desk and having a little nap there in the middle of the day. That's how tired I was. I was like, I have to do this. But obviously, I can't do it. And what would other people think, right? But that should have been a red flag for me. And it wasn't. But that's how it feels to experience fatigue and not just being tired. It's just a different level. Other things that are very common are usually digestive issues. So there is a strong link between autoimmune diseases and your gut health. So if you have chronic gut issues and any kind, really, could be chronic diarrhea, constipation, like vomiting, right? Nausea, just stomach aches, all of this could be a red flag if this is going on for a long time. So for me, that was also something I thought that was just a part of me. I always had stomach issues. I always had gut issues, especially when I was being stressed, especially when I had anything triggering happening to me. My gut was usually the first thing that would react. And that is not normal. And I thought it was normal, right? This was happening all the time since my childhood. It's not normal. So if that is something happening to you, I would ask some questions. those two are probably the most common across all autoimmune diseases. Many have skin issues, like any kind of rashes, redness, itching. That could be a giveaway. Pains. Many autoimmune diseases come with pains, unfortunately. That could be specific pains, like located in specific areas of your bodies, like joints or specific organs. So for me, I have autoimmune hepatitis, which is autoimmune inflammation of the liver. So when your liver hurts, that's already pretty late to then there's already stuff going on there. So for me, my liver didn't hurt at the time, but it was definitely already there. So when your organs start hurting, that is definitely a red flag and something to take seriously. I also have Crohn's disease, which is an autoimmune issue of the gut, or could be the whole digestive system. For me, it was the gut. There, the pain comes much faster. It's much more acute than with the liver, for example. I also have primary biliary cirrhosis, PBC, which is an autoimmune condition of the gallbladder. That comes also with really weird symptoms like crazy itching, because you have this stomach acid bile that can't drain the way it's supposed to. So it ends up in your skin, which makes you crazy itchy. And that is, surprisingly to me at the time, that wasn't so obvious for my doctor. So it took a long time for them to figure out the link there. But it could be random things like this. So really sadly, anything could be a symptom of autoimmune disease. Of course, when you experience these symptoms, doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to mean that it's autoimmune disease, right? So they could also be related to anything else, but that does make it very complicated to also diagnose autoimmune diseases, because even if you get your blood work done, it's not black and white. There isn't a checklist where they say, yes, you have this, it's an autoimmune disease. Often they have to say, what is it not? And then they arrive at a diagnosis of something like an autoimmune disease, because there isn't markers, or there isn't many markers that make it very easy to diagnose. So they would think of a million other things first before they think of an autoimmune disease. That's why the diagnosis process can be really long, really complicated, especially if there isn't any specific blood markers that are elevated that point at a specific direction. So that is sadly the reality of why getting a diagnosis takes often a long time.
Or not, because I know I'm in Canada, and our North American medical is all about treating the symptoms and never looking at the reason for the symptoms. And when you have that many symptoms, it's like impossible to pinpoint what is going on.
Yeah. It does take a really good doctor to look beyond the symptoms, and also to look at all of the symptoms you're having, and not maybe the one symptom you're having that falls within their niche. That is also sadly the truth, because our medical system is so fragmented. If you have knee issues and you go to someone who's a specialist in knees, they might not check, do you also have gut issues? How is your fatigue? Like, how is your energy level? Like, is there anything else going on? They might look at your knees look fine. Okay, sorry, here's a painkiller. But then it might be inflammation in the knees caused by your immune system. So the process is really complicated.
Absolutely. So I understand you have a roadmap that you're able to give people for free today. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Yes. So for me, it's really important that anyone who wants to really work on their health can do that, and they have a place to start, because there is so much information out there that is really confusing for people. Where do I even start? Where do I begin? What is the process? What are the different things I have to think about? So what I put together is a document that has all the steps that I did. And it's literally one by one. This is how I did it. This is how I went through the process. At this point, did I do this? At this point, did I do that? Because when I talk to people, often they're like, oh, I want to do this thing. And I don't recommend this is where they start. Like diet, for example, is one of the favorites. Everybody wants to start with diet, but it's not a good place to start. And there's many reasons for that. But that is why I have laid out a roadmap that I work through with my clients, but you don't have to be a client of mine to look at this. So if you want to do it all by yourself, if you want to do it all on your own, you can download this document on my website. I'm sure we can drop the link somewhere. And it's basically step-by-step, the different things that I recommend, because they worked for me, they work for my clients, how you approach this whole autoimmune healing journey. And it comes with a little 1-week email series also where there's a little bit more information. So exactly what all the different points mean. And it's not overwhelming. It's drawn out over a couple of days. And hopefully that's helpful.
That sounds amazing. So yes, wherever you're watching or listening to this, I will be putting the links there. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Now, do you have your final words of wisdom for the audience today?
Final words of wisdom. I didn't prepare for this. I think we talked a lot about stress today, right? And for me, looking back, the biggest stressor in this whole autoimmune healing journey was really doing the right things and doing everything that I can. And you're constantly stressed about, am I doing this right? Did I eat the wrong thing today? And like, is there anything else that I can do? Am I missing anything? So these things that we do because we want to help ourselves, we want to get better, right? This is like supposed to be the good stress, the stress that motivates us and drives us. That was the worst for me. That killed me. And it made the whole thing so much harder because I was trying to do it so perfect. And I was trying to do all the right things. And when I stopped and just took a step back and thought about, what am I actually doing to myself? Is this what I'm doing right now actually helping me? And it really wasn't. I was just driving myself into the ground, making everything so much worse for myself. So the best thing we can often do sometimes is not do all of the things. And when you look at the roadmap, for example, there's a lot of things on there. And the reason why I put this in a roadmap format is because it doesn't have to happen all at once. You have to pick one place to start, and that is enough. That is the only thing you have to do. You have to do one thing at a time. Don't look at a million things. Don't listen to the podcast and think about, I have so much stress in my life. How am I going to cut out this and this and this? And I have to meditate now, and I have to journal now, and I have to go for a walk. No, you don't have to do this. Do one thing that brings you a little bit of peace, a little bit of quiet, that takes a little bit of stress off your plate. And it's going to be 100 times better than doing the 5 things that you found out on Instagram that someone told you that are going to improve your health. The less you do, the better it often is, especially for something that is related to stress, because all of the things you add to your plate are always going to add stress. So take something off that plate and reduce it to the bare minimum. And that would be my words of wisdom.
I love that, because actually the last episode we talked about pause. Pause. We just need to pause. We need to stop. And as you said, like, if you start jumping from one thing to another and trying to do as much as possible, you're really creating a new stress.
Yeah. It's so true.
But that's the world we live in, right?
Yeah. And you want to do it for the right reasons, right? But it's too much is just too much. And doing less is, I mean, it's a cliche, right? But doing less is often more, especially with a chronic health condition. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today. And leaving you a gentle reminder to slow down and enjoy life. And I'll be putting Xenia's information everywhere. So if you have any questions, please reach out and ask her. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to the Calm Your Daily Stress podcast. Have you ever wondered what your stress personality is? Are you a self-care goddess or a burnout queen? Well, you can find out by taking my free quiz. You just need to go to www.stressquiz.info to find out where you rank. Sending you love and peace, and I'll see you in the next episode.